2 weeks is a specific amount of time, 14 days, 336 hours. It sounds like plenty of time to prove something, until you are the one who needs to prove it, and then it feels like trying to fill an ocean with a cup. Dante Ricci had never been a man who did things slowly. He made decisions fast. He moved fast. He resolved things. He did not wait for circumstances to arrange themselves, he arranged them. This was how he had built everything he had, and it was the quality that people who worked for him most often described when someone asked what it was like to be in his orbit. But Nina had said it clearly. Start looking, and let her decide. So he looked. He started with the small things, because the small things were the ones that had been missing for 3 years, and were therefore the most honest correction to make. He stopped walking past her desk like it was furniture. He started coming out of his office at natural moments, rather than only functional ones. He said good morning like it was something he meant, which it was, and he said it every day without variation, because consistency was the only real proof of anything. He listened when she spoke. That sounds simple. It is not simple. He had always heard her, registered her words, acted on her information. But listening is different from hearing. Listening means you are present in the direction of the person, interested in the thought behind the words and not only the conclusion. He had spent 3 years receiving Mara's conclusions without ever being present to the thinking behind them. He was present now. He heard the way her mind worked. Not just efficient, but genuinely inventive. The way she solved problems by anticipating them from 3 angles before they arrived. He heard the dry observation she made about the caterer on Tuesday that was technically about the delivery schedule, and also a quietly perfect description of a man who had never once been on time for anything, and had organized his entire life around apologizing for it. He heard the care she put into every phone call, even the ones with difficult people, even the ones that required her to hold firm on something and do it without making the other person feel cornered. She was very good at not cornering people. She was very good at 100 things he had not once in 3 years catalogued as gifts. He also, on Tuesday evening of the second week, went back through 3 months of files. This was not a business review. There was no operational reason to go through the files. He went through them the way you go through an old photograph album when you are trying to understand how you got from there to here, looking not at the content of each document, but at the decisions embedded in them, the rearranged schedules, the caught errors, the forwarded concerns that had arrived at the right desk at the right time, with exactly the right level of context, so smoothly that he had never once been aware of the problem she had prevented. There were hundreds. He sat at his desk until 11 at night going through them, and the accumulating weight of what he found, the sheer scope of what she had been doing, quietly, without credit, for 3 years, did something to him that the restaurant and the red dress and the laugh had not fully done. It made him ashamed, not of her, of himself, of the ease with which he had taken her work as something owed to him, as a background condition of his life rather than an ongoing act of competence and care by a specific and irreplaceable person. He went home and he did not sleep well, and in the morning he came in early again and he made the coffee again, and he sat at his desk and waited for her to arrive, not to do anything with the waiting, but because he wanted to be awake and present in the moment she walked in. She walked in at 8:11. She was wearing a dark green jacket he had not seen before. She had her bag on one shoulder and her work phone in her other hand, and she was already reading something on it before she fully came through the door. She saw the coffee and stopped, and then she looked at him through the glass partition between the reception area and his office, and he looked back at her, and something passed between them that did not have words for it, but was entirely clear. She made a small nod. He made a small nod back. She went to her desk. The second week moved differently from the first. The first week had been adjustment, both of them finding footing on changed terrain. The second week had a different quality, steadier, more deliberate, like 2 people who have decided to look at the same thing at the same time and are only now beginning to understand what it is. On Wednesday he stopped in the doorway of the small kitchen while she was making her afternoon tea, and he did not have a work reason for it, and they both knew he did not have a work reason for it, and she did not pretend otherwise. "How is the Henderson contract going?" she asked. "Signed. The clause on page 4 was flagged. You were right about it. The other side came back with exactly the ambiguity you predicted." "Of course they did." "Of course," he agreed. She poured water over her tea and waited for it to steep, and he stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, and they talked about the contract for a few minutes, and then talked about the Clement Street renovation that was scheduled for the following month. And then they talked about neither of those things, and still kept talking. She had a thought. She would examine it later, in her armchair, with the book she still wasn't reading, that this was what it would be like, to talk to him, not as an assistant receiving instructions and an employer delivering them, but as two people with things to say and interest in saying them to each other. It fit in a way she had not let herself imagine. She was careful with the thought. She held it at a small distance, but she did not set it aside. On Thursday, Paulo called. She went outside for the call, which she always did for personal calls, and they talked for 20 minutes in the small courtyard behind the building where people sometimes went to eat lunch. She told him she had been thinking. "About what?" he asked. "About what I want," she said, which is something I'm not always very good at identifying. There was a pause on the other end of the line that was kind rather than cold. "Is it the man at your office?" Paulo asked. She was quiet for a moment. She had not told him about Dante. But Paulo was perceptive, and she had apparently not been as opaque as she intended. "Something has changed there," she said. "I don't know yet what it is. But you want to find out." It was not a question, but she answered it anyway. "Yes." Another pause. "Mara," Paulo said, "you are an exceptional person. I think you know that, and I would have liked to keep having dinner with you." His voice was warm and without bitterness. "But I'm also not interested in being someone's backup plan, and I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm saying it as a practical thing." "I know," she said, "and you're not. That's not what this is." "Good," he said. "Then we agree." They said goodbye with the mutual ease of two people who had liked each other and were parting before it became complicated, and she stood in the courtyard for a moment after the call ended, looking at the sky above the buildings, and she felt the particular feeling that comes when you have made a decision that is honest, even though it is not simple. Then she went back inside. She did not go to her desk. She went to his office and knocked on the open door, and he looked up. "Do you have a few minutes?" she said. "Yes." She came in and sat down, the chair across from his desk, the way she had sat with the Henderson folder, and she put her hands in her lap, and she looked at him. "I need to say some things," she said, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond. All right?" She took a breath. Not the kind of breath that signals difficulty, the kind that signals that what follows is important. "I have worked for you for 3 years," she said, "and for 3 years I was very good at my job and you were very good at letting my job be all that I was in this building. I don't say that to wound you. I say it because it's true, and because I think you know it's true, and because the thing that's been happening over the past 2 weeks can only mean something real if we both say the true things." He said nothing. He had promised he would wait, and he was waiting. "I was also," she said, and here she kept her voice level, "managing something for a long time that I chose not to name because naming it didn't have anywhere useful to go. And I am good at that. I am very, very good at setting down the things I can't carry and getting on with what I can." She paused. "I want you to understand the discipline that took, because I think you are starting to understand it, and I need you to carry that understanding forward and not let it slip when this all becomes ordinary." He held her eyes. "I won't," he said. "You don't know that yet," she said without accusation. "Neither do I. That's the honest answer. But I need you to know that I notice when attention slips. I always have. I just chose not to react to it. Before. I won't be making that choice again." A silence. "That's fair," he said. "And I talked to Paulo today," she said. "We ended things." He was very still. "That was your decision to make," he said carefully. "I wasn't asking you to do that." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm telling you. Because it was my decision, and I made it. And I want you to understand what I'm telling you when I say it." She looked at him for a moment. "I am telling you," she said, "that I'm willing to find out what this is. Not because you brought me coffee. Not because you went through old files. And yes, I noticed you did. The light in your office was on until 11 on Tuesday, and that is not your usual pattern." The corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly. I'm willing because 2 weeks of you actually looking at me has felt different from 3 years of everything else. And I think I owe that difference an honest investigation. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Mara. What? I am going to make a genuine effort every day to be the person you are describing. Not because I am afraid of losing your professional competence, because you are someone worth the effort, and I am ashamed that it took me this long to act like it. She held that. She let it sit in the air between them for a few seconds. Then she said, You have a call at 4, the Lisbon supplier. She stood. Don't be late for it. I won't. She walked to the door. She stopped at the threshold and turned back. And Dante. He looked up. The coffee was the right amount of milk. He almost smiled. There it was again. The almost smile. The one she had now seen twice. The one she thought might be the truest expression his face made. I'll remember that, he said. She went back to her desk. She sat down and looked at her screen, and her hands were completely steady, and her mind was already moving to the 4 o'clock call, and the schedule for tomorrow, and the Clement Street timeline, because that was the job, and she was good at it, and she was not going to stop being good at it. But underneath all of that, quiet and settled, and not requiring anything from her right now, was the new knowledge that she had said the true things and been heard. And that he had looked at her, really looked, the way Paulo had leaned across a candle-lit table, and had not looked away. 3 years. 14 days, one honest conversation. It was not an ending. It was not even close to an ending. It was the first day of something that did not yet have a name, and would need time and consistency, and the ongoing willingness of two people to keep seeing each other past the easiest version of who the other person was. She knew that. He knew that. And Dante Ricci, who had been the fixed point of every room he walked into for as long as he could remember, drove home that evening in the same car on the same streets, and found that something had shifted in the center of things. Not the world, not his work or his city, or the long list of things that demanded his attention, just the center of himself, the place where the fixed point lived. It had moved. And for the first time in a very long time, he was not trying to move it back.